Hello, everyone. We hope you had a lovely weekend and a great start to Monday. And as our usual greetings goes, those of you who are joining us from Europe, a very good morning. And those of you who are joining us from Asia, a very good afternoon. Welcome to the first thematic webinar of 18th ASEF Classroom Network School Collaboration on Effective, Inclusive, and Ethical Artificial Intelligence in Education Design. Today's theme is on essentials of AIED tool design. Allow me to briefly introduce the agenda for today. So, of course, we will have very briefly speaker and session introduction, and then we will give the floor to our speaker, and then we will have a question and answer session with the speaker after the session, and then we will, of course, check out by letting you know what's next. So, first of all, today's session is absolutely important because this session sets the scene for your thematic knowledge building journey during the self-learning phase. You will learn about key information related to AI tool design in the context of your role as an educator and learning designer. The session will also focus on introducing you to key definitions as well as essentials of AI design, that the understanding and foundation that you'll be using throughout the program. So with that, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. David Huang from National Institute of Education, Singapore, based at Nanyang Technological University. Dr. David is currently an Associate Dean and also Senior Research Scientist in NIE. He has received multiple prestigious fellowship, to name a few: ARMS NCURA Global Fellowship by Harvard University in 2016, Australian Government's Endeavour Fellowship in 2017, hosted by University of Melbourne, and finally, Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study GS Fellowship in 2018. David has also worked with us throughout multiple ASEFClassNet faculty collaboration program. Some of you are alumni and mentors here. You had the pleasure of meeting him during conference in Manila last year. So without further ado, Dr. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jyoti, and good afternoon from Singapore. So it's really a great pleasure to be able to make sharings in the first session and to just lay the ground for the more in-depth sharings by other respected leaders in AI for education. I know Professor Muklu from UCL, and also Professor Tencent Chi from my home institution as well. So today's work, I will just try to cover some of the key essential part of design learning with AIED as a tool, and also to put things in the correct perspective in the way that we want to focus more on learning rather than the tool itself, right? So in that regards, I will so what I'll try to do is have a balanced approach. I will do both a critical view on AI and AI for education, so that we don't come with a very polarized view that AI can do a lot of great wonders, but without understanding about the biases and the potential harms that AI may bring to us. But I will also use this as an opportunity to share a framework that our participants can use this to design their own learning with AI ED tools, right? So that is actually the purpose for these sharings. So for the first part, I will just, I think everybody probably know that AI is a branch from the computer science, and it is mainly try to build the intelligent machine that's capable of performing the intelligent tasks like what human can do. And in fact, AIED is not something very new. In fact, even in 1960s, right, we have probably heard about this rule-based expert system, where it's designed to codify human knowledge in the forms of if and then, the kind of rule-based models to assist in some of the decision makings. And more popular now, probably heard about things like intelligent tutoring systems, or some system called adaptive learning system, or maybe people other tools called ChatGPT enabled chatbots, right? So we probably heard about all those different latest development, and all these are actually under is actually supported by this growth in terms of the machine learning techniques or deep learning techniques from the earlier, for example, random forest to even now with a generative kind of model, convolutional neural networks, and so on and so forth. So with this, I want to maybe share with you this story. Many of you probably heard about this AlphaGo's story in 2016, where AlphaGo win 4 out of the 5 games against the best human Go player. Now today, I don't want to talk about a game in terms of who win. I want to highlight 2 key moves made by AlphaGo and Nicedo in the way that, for example, right, in the move 37, in the second game, AlphaGo made a move, and Nicedo, as a human player, felt that it's a very strange move, and it could be a mistake. He thought it was a mistake, but it turns out to be a very genius move made by AlphaGo, where the human player have to surrender very quickly. Right. Then after that, in the 4th game, in the move 78, the Licedo also made a move, where the AlphaGo thought for 15 minutes, and after that, AlphaGo also surrendered. Now the story here is this, right? After the whole game, people interviewed Licedo, which is the best Go player, and he said that had he not played with AlphaGo for the previous 3 games, he would not have been made that defining move, which people call as a God's touch in the 4th game for move 78. So the machine that defeated him also helped him make the way for one of the best game in the human history. So what I'm trying to say here is that even when human and AI are competing, not just collaborate, but competing, there is an opportunity for human to learn from AlphaGo and for AlphaGo to learn from human too in that kind of settings. So therefore, what we are focusing on today in the session is really about learning. It's about how we can help, particularly helping people to learn. Now, before that, right, we also want to just do some demystifying some of the understanding, because more recently people hear about ChatGPT, right? So the question is ChatGPT AI or is AI ChatGPT? So just to share that, yeah, there are different ways of using AI. Before 2020, when ChatGPT was launched, most of the cases we are referring to are discriminative AI or discriminative use of AI. For example, banks use discriminative AI to identify people who are likely to fraud their credit card payment, right? So in education, discriminative AI can also be used to predict students in terms of the academic success or dropout from their program. Now, from the launch of the ChatGPT in the late 2022, a lot of cases are generative use of AI. So for example, ChatGPT can be used to assess students' essay based on a set of rubrics we're giving to students. We can even ask ChatGPT to generate an email for us, right? So these are different ways of AI use. But irregardless whether it's a discriminative or generative use of AI, generally, the AI or machine learning works based on probability. So they use probability to represent knowledge and to reason about the likelihood some of the outcome may happen. And because they are using probability as a way to represent knowledge and reason, so AI makes mistakes. Now, initially, when I prepared these slides, I say AI can make mistakes. I decided to change it to AI makes mistakes because it's definite that AI always make mistakes. And we have to be very careful in terms of using AI in the more ethical ways. And we have to asking about the effective use of AI as well. Now, how AI work is AI also requires in order to make that probability requires data, big data. They require advanced machine learning techniques, so such as neural network models and so on. It uses computing power. That's why you heard the trade war where NVIDIA's GPU is become something very important for AI to work. And also AI use a lot of electricity in order to run the models. So therefore, it raises a lot of concerns such as sustainability because it uses a lot of electricity, use a lot of water to even cool down their data center. And because they use data, so the data bias can affect how AI make decisions and how AI work as well. And there are also issues related to data privacy, whether we are getting the data in a way that we are protecting the people who are contributing those data, right? So if you look at just the launch of ChatGPT in the end of 2022, in 2023, you already see a large number of tools has been developed, right? As you can see from the left-hand side. But very soon, we are also come to realize there are other issues that we should be aware of. For example, there are sustainability issue I mentioned just now. ChatGPT, if you ask it to answer 30 prompts, ChatGPT works on prompt engineering, and it will consume a 500 ml bottle of water in terms of using it to cool down the data center. In terms of the energy being used, is responding to one prompt will require the energy equivalent to about 10 or 100 emails being sent, equivalent to that kind of electricity. And in terms of the carbon footprint, to train the ChatGPT model as the base model for us to use, it will consume it will produce the carbon dioxide equivalent to, for example, 128 cars being produced in one whole year. And the water used to cool down the data center to train the ChatGPT model is equivalent to about 12 Olympic-size swimming pool, right? So these are all the sustainability issues that has been draw our concern and attention. In addition to this, right, the use of the AI is also drawing concern. For example, during the COVID-19 period in year 2020, UK could not proceed with the A-level test, A-level exams. So they have the government used these students' data in terms of their prior, the previous year's grade, and also their historical track records of the school that students was attending to predict their scores for A-level. And it has led to almost 40% of students reporting that they felt that the score they gave to them was lower than what they have expected. And the rich kids, more concerning is the rich kids would be predicted to do better than the poor kids in terms of comparing to what their usual scores they get from the A-level. So the use of AI draws a lot of concern. Now, for myself, I also made an attempt. These are two examples. The first example, I asked ChatGPT to draw a picture of a slowing in Singapore, where it draws a very nice picture of Singapore and in snow. But some of you, if you know about Singapore, is that Singapore is in the tropical area near the equator, and we never have snow at all, right? So ChatGPT can generate fake information as if it is authentic, as good as is authentic. Now on the right-hand side, I have asked ChatGPT to generate a graphical representation for a very simple mathematics work problem. So as you can see, the graphic has been generated, right? It's capturing the information, but yet it's not meaningful for us to use in the mathematics classrooms because it really doesn't carry the kind of mathematical relationship that we want it to help us to illustrate. So what happened is that we think that ChatGPT appears to understand what we want, appears to be able to give a lot of intelligent answers to us, But we really have to ask the question, right? Does AI or does ChatGPT really understand? Because at the end of the day, it is still working on the probability rather than from as a human, we are really working on the meaning making, sense making, that perspective. Now, AI also raised other concerns to education. For example, many of your institutions probably also are facing the issue about people cheating with ChatGPT. If teacher gave assignment to student to write an essay, it could be the case that student asking ChatGPT for help, or maybe the essay itself is totally generated by ChatGPT, right? And while there are technological advancements, try to develop new ways to detect those kind of outputs generated by AI. But there's still a concern, right, from the education perspective, because if you look at the three parts here in terms of how AI are advancing and how we are here to uphold the academic integrity and also the assessment principle, the question is, what should be changed? Because it's very hard for us to maintain the three in the same way as we have it now, right? So should we just ban the use of ChatGPT? Or should we ask to say, are we assessing the right thing, right? If we think that in future, humans need to work with AI in their work and in their everyday life, right? Then why should we separate human from the tool, right? Just like now we are working with the computer in our everyday life and everyday study, why should we separate human and assess human alone? Why can't we assess human with the technological tool, but we have to think about what are the more important things to assess students, right? If we just assess the students in the same way that we're assessing students 20 years ago, when there's no lack of such a technology, then is our education current? Is our education assessment current? So these are the questions will be raised, are currently being raised with AI being advanced and finding their way in education. So I want to apologize to our colleagues here if you are from China for this example where so there is an example here where students are being given this AI headband, which is basically an EEG, a simple EEG headband, which is using the AI machine learning models to predict whether students are concentrating or not, right? And in fact, there is a light here. Different color will simplify whether students are paying attention or not. And this information is shared with the teacher and with the parents, right? So here is really, I want to use this to illustrate a question, right? The first question is it effective? Meaning that, first of all, is this tool effective in terms of really detecting students concentrating or not concentrating? Right? It doesn't mean that you have a very fancy tool, you have an AI behind, and you are accurately assessing students' concentration. That is the first question we want to ask about effective. And the second question we want to ask about effective is it really effective in helping students learn? Meaning that with this information given to the teacher and given to the parents, what is the next consequence? Is it that the teacher is going to use this to adjust their pedagogy in order to help students to concentrate more? Or are you going to use this information to penalize students, right? This is another part we will talk later about ethical part, right? But my question is really about, is this tool accurate? And number two is this tool really helping students to learn? The second part is about inclusive, right? Is it regardless of different background, different ability levels, and different socioeconomic status, and this tool is actually helping students, right? It's disadvantaged family students are getting are not benefiting from this, or maybe some high achieving students are not benefiting from this tool, and so on and so forth. So basically, it's asking the question about who are disadvantaged in this tool and how should we help them? The third part is about ethical, which is even more important. The question is really about, is it fair, is it transparent, and is it really how the tool will be used? Like I mentioned earlier on, right? If this tool, the data is going to send to the parents, and it's only to get the students penalized at home for not paying attention, then is this ethical, right? Is our school doing the ethical work about giving this kind of feedback to the parents rather than improving teachers' pedagogy or teachers' engagement of the students for their own learning? Is our students' well-being are put on stake because of this tool, right? So that's why for this year's class 18 session, there's a lot of focus on effective, inclusive, and ethical design of AI. Now, with this as the background, I want to move on to talk about how do we design learning with this AI, using this AI as a tools, right? So one thing that I want to highlight is that we are not really focused on the tool itself. Very much our colleagues say that, it's not about the tool, it's the pedagogy first, right? Now, I want to also argue that it's not the pedagogy first, it's actually the learning objective first. We need to first look at what do we want students to learn, particularly in the age of AI. And then we talk about the pedagogy, we talk about the tool, and we talk about the whole activity system that allows learning to take place. So I want to share one story here. A few years ago, I met this teacher, and he's asking me to say that I want to get students to do a collaborative learning. But when I give a task to them, and very often they just get it done in about 10 minutes time, and the discussion is very, very shallow. So how can I getting them to have a deep conversations in collaborative learning? And this is the case without technology at all, right? So when I look at the task as given to the students, the task is basically teacher teach students on something, and then the task for students work together is to use what teacher taught to apply and solve a problem. So basically, it's a very simple problem that doesn't require deep collaboration. Basically, one student alone probably can get it solved. And therefore, no wonder when you see students working together, right, they can get it done in 5 minutes without a very deep conversation. So what we're trying to say here is when teacher as a designer of a learning, it's important to have a teacher agency and also important to have this teacher's professionalism in terms of being a designer. It requires coming from a design thinking perspective and really thinking about how to make things happen in a very natural way. The question, for example, is for a task of application. Does it require deep collaborative learning? And if not, then is what kind of task we can design that makes collaborative learning take place. For example, one way to have this kind of deep collaborative learning take place is to get students solve the problem before teaching them what is necessary. The necessary knowledge that is needed, so that students will have to explore their own prior knowledge, they try their own solutions, and they discuss among themselves, and then therefore come to the instruction stage, right? Then students will know what to pay attention to. You will have a rich conversation, collaborative learning before, and you will have engaged students in the instructional session as well. So that's the point I want to talk about in terms of design thinking. I also want to give another example, right? This is the example that about more than 15 years ago at NIE, when we introduced this knowledge building to students. These are the primary school students, right? So what we have noticed is that the classroom culture at that time is a very much teacher-centric teaching approach. It doesn't really support a knowledge building activity where students share ideas and building on their own ideas and critique their own ideas. So instead of putting in the technology at that time, what we did is actually engage students in using a post-note, as you can see in the example, to share their ideas and building on their ideas. Now, it's only after this kind of cultural practice has shifted Then we introduce the technology tool into the classroom. So this is an example. We want to say that it's not about the tool, it's not about the technology or AI, it's really about learning, it's about the culture in the classroom and how do we change it in order for learning to take place. Now, with these two caveats that put in place and put in the right place, then I want to probably share with you one framework of some of the thoughts so that we can use that as a reference when we design learning. The first is that it's important to start with the end in mind, and we need to ask ourselves, what is the learning objective we want students to achieve, right? So for example, here is Singapore's mathematics curriculum framework for primary school. So you will say that there are different parts. At the center is the mathematical problem solving. The skill part refers to the kind of procedural knowledge, right? So for example, you have to do the operations of 3 plus 5 equal to 8, the kind of things. There is also a conceptual part. It's really a deep conceptual understanding about numeracies and the numbers and so on. There are also other parts in terms of mathematical reasoning, method cognition, and also attitudes and identity and so on and so forth, right? Now, recently we did a literature review on intelligent tutoring systems. I don't know, many of you have heard about it, right? So we did a categorization on the learning objectives of the intelligent tutoring systems for K-12 mathematics. So we did a mapping, and you can see that most of the intelligent tutoring systems are for learning about number and algebra, followed by measurement and geometry, very few on statistics. But more importantly, what we want to say is that there are very little studies, designs are for conceptual knowledge. Now, we can see that in this table, we categorize many of the studies under procedural and conceptual knowledge. But I must say that that this is purely based on what the authors in those papers reporting intelligent tutoring system are reporting. If we really understand further, analyze further about what kind of conceptual knowledge that this intelligent tutoring system are helping, it's actually mainly for error corrections, not really for deep conceptual understanding in terms of, for example, numeracies and so on. So I will say that the current intelligent tutoring systems focus a lot on helping students in terms of developing procedural skills, right? The question as an educator we had asked is that what we want? It does have a role in terms of education, in terms as a learning objective, but that's definitely not all, right? So the question we should ask then is, really, we have to look at the congruence between the desired learning outcome and what the tool is offering, and asking the question, right? So what works for who in learning what, and how fast, efficient, right? And so that is the way that we have to evaluate the kind of effectiveness. So if we are saying that intelligent tutoring system helping low achieving students in learning procedural skills, then that's okay. There's a value for this kind of learning, but how effective, how much compared to other kind of teaching methods? Is every student benefiting from it? Or what are the ethical use? For example, in other study, not about the intelligent tutoring system, in Singapore, there are some reports that particularly when students interacting with generative AI, there are questions, there are issues that students ask irrelevant questions. There are students are disengaged with these tools, right? So the question is, does students know the effective way of working with AI? Does students understand the limitations and biases of AI in order to work with AI, for example, in this case, intelligent tutoring system in an effective way? And also, how will the result of learning being used, right? Just like the earlier case, well, the result being used to penalize students, or is really helping students to learn? And for teachers, when we make a decision to use this tool for learning, is it because of the learning needs that this particular students need? Or is it because we just have this tool available, so we just make use of this tool because of availability, right? So these are the questions about ethical, inclusive, and the effective use of AI that we have to consider. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the pedagogy second, right? We have to think about the pedagogy. So if you talk about this ICAP framework, you talk about different kind of engagement in terms of being interactive or constructive, active, and passive, and so on. Different kind of learning activities can support this kind of engagement. So the question again is that what kind of pedagogy that we want to design in order to help students to learn the kind of knowledge that we want them to develop. So for example, this is one of the example of the tool that currently we were developing for students, right? We want to use ChatGPT to help students learn to solve mathematical work problems. We want to use structured inquiry as the pedagogy because we are targeting at primary school students. We don't want to open the inquiry space too big. So as you can see that the pedagogy, in this case, structured inquiry, help us to develop this application, right? Making use of the ChatGPT. And also it allows us to evaluate accordingly, right? In the way that the first evaluation is, does this tool, this design really allows this structured inquiry taking place, right? The second question is, of course, is about effective. Does this design, if it's according to our structured inquiry taking place, does it lead to a desired learning outcome, and for who, and what are the ethical considerations that we need to take note of, right? So this is the second part. Of course, the third part we want to talk about is then the AIED tool, right? We talk about the knowledge first, pedagogy, and then the tool we want to choose. So in this case, I want to talk about this affordance. So if you look at the example of the kettle here, right, you must find it's very weird because it's very hard for you to pour water from this kettle, right? The question is why people design a kettle like this, right? So we have to think about affordances. What does the design afford that kind of action to take place? So this affordances is connected to the structure. As you can see here, in this particular structure, the pouring mouth and the handle is in the same direction, and it enables or constrains certain behavior in terms of pouring the water out, and that we have to consider that with regards to intended purpose that we want to achieve, and it is relational. It's actually relating to what the user is capable to do and intended to do, right? So in that regards, right, I want to again share with you the intelligent tutoring system very briefly. All right. So for example, intelligent tutoring system has 3 models are highlighted in red, right? So the DOMI model basically captures the knowledge that you would want students to learn very much in the descriptive way. For example, right, the example here, steam shall be output of a boiler, right? So kind of in a statement. The learner model basically captures learner status in terms of what they know, what they don't know. And the pedagogical model basically provide the pedagogical inputs in terms of giving the hints or giving the answers to students. And this is done through the outer loop in the way that when students is able to answer one question correctly, the DOMI model will decide what is the next question to give it to students, or what is the next knowledge to learn. Whereas the inner model is based on students' performance if they are stuck, and it will decide what is the best pedagogical approach to take, right? So everything sounds correct, and it says that it actually provide personalized learning to students. Now, but what I want to say is that affordance is different from learning outcomes, right? That's why when we evaluate the effectiveness of the AIED, we have to evaluate based on the outcome rather than just based on the affordance. So here is one example I'm sharing with you from one of the intelligent tutoring system data set we have extracted, focus on 3 knowledge on in mathematics on division, fraction division, and fraction multiplication. Now the dots here represents the delta of students beginning and at the end. Now, beginning meaning that how system is assessing students' mastery of this knowledge at the beginning. Now, end means at the end of the learning, how well the system is assessing the students' mastery of the knowledge, right? So the delta is supposed to measure students' learning gain based on what the system is estimating students' mastery. Now, surprising to us, right? If you look from this chart, is about half of the students, almost, right? They have the negative delta, meaning that based on system assessment, their learning gain is negative, right? So I'm not saying that students are not learning from the intelligent tutoring systems. What I'm saying is there are a lot of things that we have to investigate and understand and to evaluate before we can get these two students, right? Because based on this data about how system is estimating students' mastery of the learning, it's not very convincing to me based on just this data, right? So just now we talk about knowledge first, pedagogy second, and then choose the tool based on the affordance. And the last part I want to share is actually we want to say that we are not designing just based on these three. In fact, we are designing learning based on the whole activity system, right? So if you heard about the activity system, you will know that there are different components here. On top is the tool. On the left-hand side is the subject, which is, for example, student, right? Now, rule refers to how do you want the student engage, for example, in learning, for example, with the tool, right? Including what we talked about just now, getting students to be comfortable of sharing ideas with each other using the post note, right? The rule also includes the ethical use of AI if we are using the AIED tool. Now, the community is actually different significant others, including teachers, other peers in the learning. The division of labor talk about how, for example, student and the community are dividing, and then also the tool dividing in the task, whether in a collaborative ways or in a cooperative ways and so on. Of course, the last one is the object and outcome, which is really the learning outcome. Now, what we want to see is that, first of all, this activity system is a goal-oriented system. It's towards the learning objectives. And secondly, pedagogy plays a very important role because pedagogy will define how for example, the division of labor, how the whole system will work. And AIED is only one element of it, right? So what I want to highlight from this tool is learning is beyond just using the tool to learn what. I want to just highlight a little bit more, right? So earlier we talked about the two student and learning objectives, right? So there are other learning outcomes we have to ask ourselves. For example, in the Singapore context, there's a 21st century skills and competencies are part of the curriculum as well. So how does the tool, when we are designing a tool, it's okay that we are addressing some of the procedural skills, but do we also have tools that are helping students to develop 21st century skills and competencies? Now, in terms of the other part I mentioned to you just now, right? So it's very important that we need to pay attention to, for example, the classroom rules, the ethical use of AI and students' AI literacies and so on. Now, coming the other part in terms of collaboration and division of labor, shared our roles, right? So there are different ways of collaboration, and whether, for example, in this collaboration, is some students are being disadvantaged? Is it inclusive? And what are some of the ethical concerns, right? So, for example, my PhD student recently have one publications looking at the role of ChatGPT in the feedback process in collaborative learning. And she noticed something very interesting, right? In the Asian context, sometimes the members in the collaborating group doesn't want to respond to a particular student who is asking the question. And the students eventually find out that she can actually ask a lot of questions to get a good response and feedback from ChatGPT. Now, this is a good thing where in terms of collaborative learning, that students getting feedback from ChatGPT that complement the current team. But that also raised other concerns, right, regarding, for example, the role of ChatGPT in giving feedback, because you know that the design of the ChatGPT is whenever you ask question, ChatGPT will answer, right? In fact, one of my collaborators says that ChatGPT is very chatty. It always answers you. But from the pedagogical perspective, is it always good for students to keep on asking ChatGPT? Is it in some situation, would it be good for students to ponder upon the question first or to discuss among themselves first? So what I'm trying to say is that having the technology there seems to be working, seems to be helping, but it can raise a lot of fundamental questions about the pedagogy, about learning, right? So these are exactly the things that we want to highlight and we want to take into consideration when we are designing learning using AIED. Right. So quickly, I want to highlight a few other things that is about implementation, right? You have the tool that works very well in the well-designed activity system, but there could be issue in implementation. For example, our literature review on intelligent tutoring systems saying that it's only 2% of the population who are using intelligent tutoring system. This is actually a large-scale implementation in the US, in one or two of the state, right, for the whole state. Only 2% of the user met the fidelity benchmark in terms of the number of hours of use as well as the intended design of use. So getting the use in a high fidelity according to our design is also something that we have to pay attention to. Now, the last part I want to say is about implementation and evaluation. Like I mentioned just now, we cannot assume that based on if there is a affordance, there will be a better design outcome, right? That link has to be evaluated in a very empirical way. So for example, despite the intelligent tutoring system have been there for maybe 30, 40 years, and even for the recent 10, 20 years, there are a lot of further advancement. The large-scale evaluation studies and the meta reviews, right, still haven't have a very conclusive findings regarding the effect of intelligent tutoring systems on students' learning. So that means two things. First, of course, evaluation is important. And secondly, continuous improvement and make it work on the ground is also important, right? So we can look into, for example, the learning outcomes in terms of the looking at who is benefiting, who is not benefiting, to what extent. But more importantly, is also look at the process of learning in order to help us understand why it is working or why it is not working, and therefore how to improve. And also to bring students' voice into this picture as well. What students think? Are they feel bored or are they engaged? What are the designs, what are the improvements that can help them learn better, right? So therefore, it helps us to improve in terms of the design of the AIED tools. It helps us to design the whole activity system and help us improve maybe on the implementation so that eventually our students will benefit from this AIED. So coming to the last, I want to say that, yeah, this activity system, in my view, can be a tool to help, a framework to help us design AIED. And in this regards, we want to say that first of all, teacher agency is important. Teacher as a designer for this activity system. And in designing, I will argue that the learning objective is the first, pedagogy is the second, AIED 2 is the third, and we have to consider the whole activity system, not just the first three parts. And the second one is that the teacher is also a facilitator for this whole activity system when you make it happen, and teacher can be a member of the community in the activity system. Now, when it comes to the effective and inclusive and ethical use of AI, I think it's important for us to say that this application, AIED tool, is free from bias and be accurate. And secondly is that we have to always ask, so what is working for who in learning what? In terms of inclusive, it's really to ask whether all students are benefiting from it, particularly by asking who are disadvantaged in this AIED tool. If you allow me, right, let me just give you another example. So in 2018, I was in Africa in a fellowship. So we met up with the students there and we talk about using AI for teaching and learning because at that time, South Africa is also talk about Industry 4.0 about AI, where the student telling me that, well, can you design an application that the intelligent tutoring system, for example, that can be delivered through a handphone? When they say handphone, it's really the old handphone, the model handphone, like Nokia handphone, not the new model of the smartphone that we have. And because she said that, look, this is the only tools that we have. We don't have a computer at home, and the only technical tool that we have is this old phone. So if AI is going to help us, then the question is, can you get it done through this old phone? Otherwise, we will be disadvantaged, right? So it's really about important question about asking these inclusive issues. And of course, the ethical part about student agency, student well-being, and protecting our students in this whole thing. It's about student voice as well. Yeah, so this is basically the key things I want to say, I want to highlight, and moving forward, you will have a more in-depth hearing from respected speakers about effective, inclusive, ethical design of AI and so on, right? So maybe with that, in the interest of time, maybe I will stop here and have some conversation.
Thank you, David, for such an insightful presentation, and we love that you have highlighted learning objectives over and over again throughout your presentation, because it is absolutely important for our teachers that in their role as an educator, they prioritize learning objectives and the affordances when thinking about using not just AI in education tools, but any edtech tools. I see some questions in the chat box. May I invite Michael to unmute and ask the questions you were raising in the chat box?
Yep, no problem. I have a couple of questions for you. Thanks for the presentation first. But in terms of your learning outcomes, are you looking at just the explicit objectives of the lesson and not also the competencies we're looking to embed, like leadership or critical thinking or improving resilience? So I'll put that question to you first.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very great question. So from NIE, we believe of course, we think that the domain knowledge is important, but we think the 21st century skills and competencies are very, very important. In fact, we think, or at least for myself, one of the conversation I had with my colleague is that with AI being able to support on the domain knowledge to large extent, one day we will ask ourselves, should the importance of domain knowledge and 21CC be flipped? Well, one day we felt that the 21st century skills and competence will be more important because those domain knowledge can be supported by, for example, by AI. So just to answer your question, we think, at least I think, the 21st century skills and competencies are very, very important. Unfortunately, I will say the traditional or the kind of AIED tools, particularly those currently in the market commercialized, are still very much based on the traditional learning outcomes, such as those procedural skills and so on, as shown in the intelligent tutoring systems. And that's why I think all the more importance, the teacher's voice is important, and we should highlight what is important in teaching and learning and how we can use AI to help students learn more important learning outcomes. Yeah, so that's hopefully answers your question.
Thank you very much. Yes, I guess I'm more an advocate for transforming education by teachers actually knowing how to use large language models and small language models rather than using just simply tools. So that kind of aligns with my thinking. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? You can unmute yourself and speak, or you can raise your hand and we will invite you. I have a question, David. For our participants, if you could simplify affordances, because it's very strongly connected to design within effectiveness, inclusivity of AI tools and ethical aspects. If you could simply highlight it again, I think it would be really useful.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry that I couldn't have enough time to talk about that aspect. So for example, if I use the intelligent tutoring system example, the way it's designed, for example, how the domain model is being designed in a descriptive way has defined that it can only provide support, for example, for certain procedural level kind of very descriptive skills, rather than some kind of conceptual understanding or 21st century skills and so on and so forth, right? So what I'm trying to say is that how the system are designed and engineered, that kind of structure will affect how the intelligent tutoring system behave, and that behave can only lead to certain kind of outcome. So for example, right, if you based on the design and the structure of intelligent tutoring systems, the affordance is to provide personalized support for students to learn procedural knowledge. I think that part, the affordance is clear to me, right? But I will have a question whether it can helping students to learn other kind of learning outcomes, such as conceptual understanding, 21cc. Now, having said that, right, just now I also say affordances is different from the outcome. Now, it has affordances to help students to learn procedural knowledge, right? But that affordance of that outcome, the effect still have to be evaluated. I'm also saying that the evidence on the effect is still not very strong. There are evidence showing that it works. There are large-scale implementation showing that it doesn't work also, doesn't work in a very large systematic ways. So there's still a long way for us to make it work. In my view, it's really, if you take teacher as the designer of learning, that perspective, it's really about how teacher can make use the tool work in their classroom. I think that is another way to complement the current system that's very much dominated by the commercial sectors, delivering products that may not fit into the kind of learning outcome that we want our students to achieve. And sometimes, if I use other words, the Michael Fullan's paper with a book on education technology, right, is that it may still be overpromised and under-delivered, right? So it's very important for us to take on that perspective on effective, inclusive, and ethical use of AI, and emphasizing the role of the teacher. We are not saying that teacher has to design the tool, but we think that teacher take an important role of design learning, with the tool being part of the activity system. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Angela, please go ahead.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for the presentation. I do have a response, since I very much relate to what Michael just said, that we have to learn to teach students how the models work, so they have the understanding how to use the technology. And as I always say in my teacher trainings, as well as when I work with the students, that AI can be assistant but cannot be replacement. So this is the main message I bring to my students, and then we can go on with talking with skills, talking with particular models that we use. But in general, we have to give this message very clear. This is a good model to use, but this is an assistant that can do a lot of job for you. But you will be the one who will finally assess whether yes or no, use this information or not. Is it reliable or not? This is what I think is one of the most important messages. And that is why in the assessment, if we speak about the assessment now, we have to particularly concentrate on the engagement. Because if we see through the process, if the student is participating, is answering, with or without AI, it doesn't matter. If he's involved and we can see the engagement, then the learning process is going on. But if we don't, if we just receive an essay written by AI or just a test completed by AI, then of course we cannot be sure whether it's a yes or no. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Angela. First of all, I totally agree with you, right? So at the end of the day, it's about, for example, student engagement. it doesn't mean that you give an AI to students and students will miraculously get engaged, right? Of course, there are some novelty where students feel interested in and want to be engaged. But other than that, to engage students is still very much about a learning design rather than the tool itself. The second part I want to share with you is that it's about how do we give students this AI literacy training. We're helping them to understand, for example, the models and so on. Now, I want to maybe share my thoughts, right? Depending on the level of students, and we may not need to go to the very technical part of sharing how the model, for example, how the generative model works. In fact, one thing that I thought very powerful was a visit I had before COVID to MIT Media Lab, where they have shared with us this example of how they engage kindergarten students to learn about AI and AI literacy. So basically, they gave this Google tool to students, kindergarten students. And first of all, they let the students, the children, to use the tool to detect their faces, meaning that the tool can predict what is their face, what is not their face, right? So in order to help to get students to say, wow, AI can be so smart in terms of even I sometimes make a funny face, AI can still detect that's me, that's not other people, right? So second thing they get the student to do is they try to get at that time the technology is like this, right? So if you put your hand on your forehead, AI will not be able to recognize you. That was the technology before COVID, right? So in the way that the student get trained to say, now AI can be tricked, AI can make mistakes, and there's a way to trick AI. So in a way that it's helping students to say that understand that first of all, AI is powerful. Secondly, AI can make mistakes. And therefore, one thing that you can engage students in a conversation is about what is the ethical use of AI, understanding that AI has all these limitations. So I will say, depending on the level of students, if it's primary school students or even a secondary students, there might not be a need to go in depth in terms of helping them understanding how, for example, generative AI model works. But there is I don't know about your country. For example, in Singapore, we have AI Singapore, and they are working on the kind of curriculum in terms of in primary school, secondary school, and junior college and university. What are the kind of AI competency and also AI literacy levels are needed, and that's going along with how we build, helping students understand the technical part of the AI model. I hope that helps to answer your question.
Thank you, David. And since you raised it, Angela, whether AI will replace teachers or not, actually, during first series when we focused on the topic, we ran a blog among our teachers on whether AI will replace teachers or not. I just shared the link, so those of you who are interested to hear some perspective from our alumni teachers, please check it out. We only have exactly 1 minute, and I see that Laurel, you have a question. Please keep it brief. And those of you who couldn't ask any questions today, please you can also reach out to us or post your question in the chat box, and then we will share this with David so that he can at least share his response in writing. Laurel, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try and keep it really brief. In terms of what you said, David, about over-promising and under-delivering, it kind of linked to my question, which was for your study and fidelity of use of AI models, what were some of the measures that you used to assess the effectiveness?
Okay, thank you. I must say that it is not my study. It was in the literature that was an implementation study in the US, in some of the states, and it was reported that. So they are the effectiveness actually based on students' learning outcome. So they actually, as part of the implementation for the few year kind of implementation, right? At the end, there is a measurement of students' learning outcome. So they were actually comparing the student learning outcome as the measurement. And if Jyoti, if you allows me, right, can I just take a little while and talk a little bit about just now the question about the role of teacher, because
Yes,
that is also something very dear to my heart as well,
of
right?
course.
So in my view, teacher, okay, I must also say in some of the countries, because of the low birth rate, I also say that teacher, they are also reducing the number of teachers needed in the system. But I want to say that the role of teacher is actually very important, even in the era of AI. And but I want to say that the role of the teacher will have to transform. It's definitely not the same way. I want to say that first of all, we have to think about what we want students to learn. Just now we talk a little bit of 21st century skills and competencies. I want to say that the future skills could be even beyond some of the things we have already articulated in 21st century skills and competencies. It's about how students make judgment, how students set priorities, what is the better way of a student and AI working in collaborative ways, that kind of augmentation and so on. And many of the things may not be even, we may not be even aware as important skills at the time being. So I do think we are at the eve where our curriculum may need to be seriously evaluated. And secondly, the role of the teacher will be different. So for example, if in the classroom, just now the tool, for example, right, detecting student concentrating or not concentrating, imagine that in the future classroom, a lot of data are being collected, analyzed, and streamed to the teachers. And how teacher and the AI can collaboratively make pedagogical decisions, right, that are benefiting students rather than penalizing students. And what is the requirement in terms of teachers' knowledge and teachers' skills, right, in such a kind of augmentation in learning, right? So I will say a lot of things are going to change. We are still at the very beginning stage of making the exploration, but I believe the future is still human AI augmentation. In this case, is teacher AI augmentation, and together with the students for their learning. Most likely for a learning outcome may not be the same as what we have prioritized now. So it will be a very exciting years in front of us.
Thank you, David. From the ASEFClassNet team, as well as on behalf of our participants, a big thank you. We believe that the insights that you have shared today set the scene for them. And from our side, we want to really stress on the area that you highlighted, learning objective. To those of you who are mentors, to those of you who are participants, when you will embark on designing your innovative teaching practice, please remember this. Learning objectives and what your student needs come first. Only when you are struggling between pedagogy and technology, then only pedagogy comes first. And of course, some of the key areas that Dr. Huang highlighted, if you have any concerns, please explore them. The slides will be available, the recording will be available as well, so that when we dig a bit deeper into specific topic area, effectiveness, inclusivity, and ethical aspects, based on the upcoming sessions, you can deepen your knowledge. Thank you again, David. And with that, allow me to introduce what's next. So we have another exciting thematic webinar planned for next week on 26th of May, Monday as usual. It will be same time, Singapore time 16 to 17, and European summer time 10 to 11. And we will have a presentation by Professor Mutlu Chukurova from UCL Knowledge Lab, University College London from the United Kingdom. And we are also very fortunate to have him because he's the co-author for UNESCO AI Competency Framework for Teachers. So hopefully this will be a great session for you to deepen your understanding of effective AI design. Very briefly, communication reminder, if you haven't followed the ASEF Edu Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter pages, please do so. And we will reach out to you with our connection request very soon. As usual, have a lovely day in Europe and a great evening, afternoon, based on where you are in Asia. Thank you so much for joining and actively participating. Apologies for running over time by a few minutes. We will see you during next week's session. Thank you.